Hi, I'm JOLY. This is my channel, China's New Playbook. What if I told you China is building a third national transportation network? Not on the ground, not underground, but in the air between 0 and 3,000 meters. And that on July 1st, 2026, it becomes legal to fly there without asking anyone for permission. This is not science fiction. This is the low-altitude economy. And by the time most global LPs have heard about it, the best entry windows will already be closed. By the end of this report, you will understand the 6-layer supply chain that powers this sector, the specific investment opportunities at 2 different time horizons, and critically, the 4 companies I would put on an institutional watch list today. But first, I need you to understand why this is not just another sector report. This is infrastructure. And infrastructure investing follows a different logic entirely. Let me anchor this with a framework. China's first infrastructure revolution was highways. 160,000 kilometers built between 1990 and 2020, turning a fragmented continental economy into a single integrated market. The second was high-speed rail, 45,000 kilometers, the largest network on Earth, shrinking economic geography and creating entirely new metropolitan clusters. Now the third is being laid, not horizontally, but vertically. The low-altitude economy is not just about flying taxis. It is an integrated transportation layer operating between 0 and 3,000 meters, built on 3 pillars: electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, eVTOLs, as a rolling stock, 5G advanced communication networks as the signaling system, and thousands of vertiports and landing pads as the stations. Here's a number that should stop you. The Civil Aviation Administration of China projects this sector will reach 1.06 trillion RMB in 2026. That is roughly $145 billion in a single year. By 2035, the forecast is 3.5 trillion RMB. That is a compounded annual growth rate north of 14% for a decade. For context, that is larger than the global semiconductor equipment market, larger than the global private equity secondary market. And it did not exist as an investable category 5 years ago. Now, here's what makes this different from every other emerging sector I have covered on this channel. Look at the policy velocity. 2024, low-altitude economy appears in the government work report for the first time, labeled a new growth engine. 2025, it is elevated to strategic emerging industry. 2026, it is promoted again, this time to emerging pillar industry, placed alongside integrated circuits, aerospace, and biomedicine as a national strategic priority. 3 years, 3 promotions. No other sector in China's modern economic history has moved up the policy ladder this fast. And then there's the legal architecture. On July 1st, 2026, the newly revised Civil Aviation Law takes effect. For the first time, it establishes a dedicated chapter on low-altitude economic development. Here is the part that matters for investors. Airspace from 0 to 120 meters is now classified as open. Notification only. No approval required. From 120 to 300 meters, it is controlled but with a simplified, expedited clearance process. This effectively creates the largest deregulated airspace in the world for commercial operations. The United States does not have this. Europe does not have this. China just opened 75% of its low-altitude airspace for commercial use, with a legal framework that took effect 1 month ago. Now, I want to talk about the single most important barrier to entry in this sector, and the reason why early movers will capture disproportionate value. It is not technology. It is not capital. It is certification. In China, an eVTOL cannot legally carry a single paying passenger or a single paying package, for that matter, without full certificates from the Civil Aviation Administration. Type certificate, production certificate, airworthiness certificate, and operating certificate. Think of this as the birth certificate, the manufacturing license, the individual safety check, and a commercial operating permit. Globally, only 2 models have completed all required certifications for mass production and commercial delivery. Both are Chinese. The first is EHang's EH216-S, an autonomous 2-seat passenger eVTOL. It holds all 4 certificates globally and delivered 221 units in 2025 alone. EHang has over 1,000 orders in backlog and approximately 1.1 billion RMB in cash reserves. The second is Autoflight's V2000CG, the world's first turn-class cargo eVTOL to receive full certification. It has already begun deliveries for offshore platform logistics and island supply missions. And it recently received reciprocal type certification from Indonesia, meaning China's aviation standards can now be recognized by other national regulators. That is a geopolitical signal in itself. Beyond these 2, the certification pipeline is dense and accelerating. Xiaopeng Aero HT, backed by nearly $1 billion in total funding, expects its type certificate for the modular flying car by the second half of 2026. Aero Fuji, a JOLY subsidiary, is simultaneously preparing for type certificate completion and a potential star market IPO, with over 1,000 units in committed orders. Volant Aviation just closed a $300 million Series C, the largest single round in commercial passenger eVTOL history, and has 1,900 units in backlog, including a $1.75 billion export order to Thailand. Here's the investment logic. The certification process for a new eVTOL model takes a minimum of 3 to 5 years. That means the companies completing certification in 2026 and in 2027 are building a regulatory moat that late entrants cannot cross until at least 2029. In a market growing at 40% annually, that is an eternity. Pause for a second and ask yourself, when was the last time your investment committee evaluated an industry where the primary barrier to entry was a government safety certification that takes half a decade to complete? Now, let me map the supply chain. This is the section worth standing to sector analysts. I'm going to walk you through 6 layers. At each layer, I will give you the core investment thesis and companies to watch. Layer 1, the battery. This is the single largest constraint on the entire industry. An eVTOL consumes 65 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometers, roughly 4 times what an electric car consumes over the same distance. That means energy density is everything. The current state of play, Sonwonder, has mass-produced 2 generations of aviation-grade semi-solid-state batteries, 320 watt-hours per kilogram for drones, 380 for passenger eVTOLs, with a 3rd generation targeting 400 by end of 2026. CALB produces a 360 watt-hour per kilogram cell exclusively for Xiaopeng's flying car, with a next-generation solid-state version above 400 targeted for 2027. And Xinjie Energy is building China's first dedicated aviation solid-state battery production line, targeting 400 watt-hours per kilogram, which, if achieved, would double current range. The investment thesis here is straightforward. Battery costs represent roughly 40% of an eVTOL's bill of materials. And a supplier that locks in certifications with the major OEMs during the type certificate process becomes embedded for the life of the aircraft program. Layer 2. Carbon fiber composites. An eVTOL is 60 to 90% carbon fiber by structural weight. Every kilogram saved translates to roughly 1 additional kilometer of range. The domestic supply chain here is surprisingly mature. Guangzhou Composites holds an estimated 65% market share among eVTOL OEMs, with 6.9 billion RMB in confirmed orders extending through 2027. Zhongfu Shenying has achieved a laboratory-scale T1200 carbon fiber, the highest strength carbon fiber in the world at 8,056 megapascals. Zhongjian Technologies' T800 grade fiber has been qualified into the eVTOL supply chain for primary load-bearing structures. The moat is deep. Aviation-grade carbon fiber certification alone takes 2 to 3 years per material system. Once qualified, switching costs are prohibitive. Let me put this in plain terms. If you want exposure to the low-altitude economy, but are not ready to bet on a specific eVTOL brand, carbon fiber is your proxy. Every single aircraft, regardless of which OEM wins, needs it. Layer 3. Electric propulsion systems. InPower has secured exclusive supplier status for Yihang's next-generation electric propulsion system, with a dedicated production line already built. This is the Intel inside play. Supply the motor to the dominant OEM and ride the volume curve. Layer 4. Avionics and flight control. This is the brain. Zongheng Technology, an industrial drone flight control specialist, grew revenue 31% in 2025 and turned profitable. China Electronics Technology Group's 10th Research Institute is the avionics backbone for multiple OEM programs. The key variable here: redundant flight control system that can handle single-point failures. This is the difference between a drone and an aircraft. Layer 5. 5G Advanced Low-Altitude Networks. This is the infrastructure layer most investors overlook. The 3 state-owned telecom operators, China Mobile, China Telecom, China Unicom, are deploying 5G advanced base stations with integrated sensing capabilities specifically for low-altitude coverage. Shenzhen alone is adding 6,000 5G-A base stations and 500 sensing stations over 3 years, targeting full coverage of all flight routes and landing points. Shanghai aims for citywide low-altitude communication network coverage by end of 2026. The investment logic. This is a regulated infrastructure built out where the government is the customer and the capex is already budgeted through the 755 billion RMB Central Investment Plan for 2026. Layer 6. The OEMs. I have already covered the certification leaders, but here's what the order books tell you about market conviction. Xiaopen Aero HT, over 7,000 pre-orders at a price point under 2 million RMB per unit. That implies a 14 billion RMB pipeline from individual consumers alone. Aero Fuji, over 1,000 committed orders, largely from financial leasing companies, ICBC Leasing, Bank of China Leasing, AVIC Leasing. Volant, 1,900 units with the single largest export order in the sector's history at $1.75 billion to Thailand's Pan Pacific Group. These are not the letters of intent. These are contracts with down payments. Evaluate your current China allocation against this framework. Which of these 6 layers are accessible through your existing portfolio companies, and which require new positions? Now, let me give you the 2 horizon investment map. And since this channel is built for VC and PE investors, every company I mentioned in this section is private, accessible through equity rounds, not a ticker on the screen. In the 1 to 2 year window, quite now through 2028, the opportunity is in growth stage OEMs and pre-IPO supply chain specialists. 3 specific opportunities. 1. Certification stage eVTOL OEMs with revenue traction. Volant Aviation just closed a $300 million Series C at an approximately $2.9 billion post-money valuation. The largest single round in Asian passenger eVTOL history. It has 1,900 units in backlog, including a $1.75 billion export order to Thailand. Order Flight raised $200 million in early 2026 at a $2 billion valuation, with CATL founder Robin Zeng personally investing $100 million. TCAP technology takes a different technical path. Tilt rotor rather than compound wing, achieving 320 km per hour cruise speed, the fastest in China's passenger eVTOL pipeline. It closed its B++ round at an estimated $300 to $500 million valuation and secured a 350-unit, $1 billion export order to the UAE, the largest Chinese eVTOL export commitment by unit count. TCAP is now in the conformity verification phase with G1 issued, targeting certification in 2027. All 3 are private, all 3 are at the certification frontier, and all 3 are at growth stages where PE capital can access the regulatory moat directly. 2. Pre-IPO companies with clear liquidity path. Aero Fuji filed for stock market IPO tutoring in April 2026, with over 1,000 committed orders from ICBC Leasing, Bank of China Leasing, and AVIC Leasing. Xiaopen Aero HT, with nearly $1 billion in cumulative funding and 7,000 plus consumer pre-orders, reportedly filed confidentially with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in January 2026. For PE investors, these are the names where pre-IPO rounds offers a defined exit horizon. 3. Private supply chain specialists with embedded OEM positions. Xinjie Energy is a private company building China's first dedicated aviation solid-state battery production line, targeting 500 watt-hours per kilogram by end of 2026. It closed a Series A of several hundred million RMB in August 2025, led by China Merchants International and Dacheng. If it delivers on its energy density target, it fundamentally rewrites the unit economics of the entire sector. And it is still at a stage where growth capital can take a meaningful position. In the 3 to 5 year window, 2028 to 2031, the value shifts downstream and to the enablers, the infrastructure operators. Shenzhen is investing 12 billion RMB in low-altitude facilities through 2026, with an additional 20 billion planned for the 5th 5-year plan. The national infrastructure built out for general airports and eVTOL landing pads is projected at 600 billion RMB through 2030, per Guosheng Securities. This is where institutional scale capital deployment happens. And recall our episode 4 discussion on QFLP structures, which is the operational vehicle for moving cross-border capital into exactly these kinds of infrastructure assets. The consolidation play. As the sector matures through 2029 and 2030, expect vertical consolidation. OEMs acquiring battery suppliers, avionics specialists being absorbed into larger platforms. The companies building certification moat today are the acquirers of tomorrow. For PE investors, current growth stage rounds are also M&A option positions. And a solid-state breakthrough. When energy density crossed 500 watt-hours per kilogram, which Xinjie Energy targets for end of 2026, range doubles, payload increases, and routes that are uneconomical today become viable. The company that delivers this first captures pricing power across the entire OEM base, and it is a private company today. Here is what your China Council should be briefing you on. The 5th 5-year plan, approved in 2026, explicitly lists eVTOL equipment among 109 major national engineering projects. When a sector appears in the 5-year plan's project list, it means multi-year, multi-ministry resource allocation. Capital, talent, land, airspace, everything gets prioritized. This is a Chinese industrial policy signal that global LPs consistently underestimate and consistently pay for missing. So let me close the loop I opened at the top of this report. Here are the 4 companies I would put on the institutional watch list today. Number 1, Volant Aviation. Growth stage, $2.9 billion post-money, largest export order in sector history. This is your pure play on the Certification Moat, a private company with real backlog and international revenue. Number 2, TCAP Technology. Growth stage with an estimated $300 to $500 million valuation, a fraction of Volant's enterprise. Its tilt-rotor E20 is the fastest passenger eVTOL in China's certification pipeline at 320 km per hour, and its 350 unit $1 billion UAE export order is the largest by unit count. This is your differentiated bet on the certification moat with a lower entry point and a tilt rotor configuration that aligns with the global industry consensus. Number 3. Xiaopeng Aero HT. Pre-IPO with a reported Hong Kong listing in motion. 7,000 plus consumer pre-orders for a product category that does not exist anywhere else in the world. This is your pre-IPO bet on category creation. 4. Aerofugia. Pre-IPO with a star market filing. JOLY backing, institutional order base, the clearest liquidity path in the cohort. 4 companies, 4 different theses. Certification moat at scale. Tilt rotor differentiation with a lower entry point. Category creation and institutional liquidity. One sector. If your China allocation does not yet include a position in this space, the window is open now. It will not stay open. Now, let me bring this back to the China Playbook framework. In episode 2, we established that supply chain depth is China's structural advantage. The low-altitude economy is the purest expression of that thesis yet. A sector where 80% of core components are domestically sourced, where the global leaders in certification are Chinese, and where the cost of a single component is 1/5 to 1/6 of what it costs in the United States, as the Shenzhen UAV Industrial Association has documented. In episode 3, we talked about intellectual property arbitrage. The low-altitude economy is where that arbitrage becomes hardware. Between 2015 and 2024, invention patent applications in China's low-altitude sector grew more than 11-fold. In the first half of 2025 alone, 11,165 new applications were filed, up 52% year-on-year. China is not just manufacturing these aircraft, it is writing the standards. And in episode 4, we walked through the QFLP execution blueprint, the operational infrastructure for moving capital into China cleanly and securing hard distributions. The low-altitude economy is exactly the kind of sector where QFLP capital can access growth stage assets before they IPO, before they become household names, before the rest of the world figures out what is happening. This is not a 3-year trade. This is a decade-long infrastructure build-out. And the certification window, the period where regulatory moats are being dug, is open right now and will close by 2028. In our next report, we are going to take the certification moat we identified today and follow it one layer deeper into the supply chain, because that moat doesn't stop at the aircraft level. It propagates down to every certified component, every approved supplier, and the companies holding that hidden moat might be the safer bet. I will see you in the next report.